Hello and welcome to another episode of Raw Chatter. I am your host, Vicky Midwood, speaking. This podcast is all about being honest, real, and raw, about addictions, about reinvention, about really high performance and lifestyle that affects those of us who genuinely want to live a life that is fun, enjoyable, and gives us a sense of fulfillment or contentment, but also serenity. Now, those three words that I just said there, contentment, fulfillment, serenity, they kind of don't seem to go with high performance, do they? And what I want to talk about today really is linked to my blog this month, which is all about high functioning being a symptom. And I wanted to ask this question today. What purpose is high functioning as a symptom serving? Now, let me talk to you about a client of mine that I worked with not that long ago, a lady called Alex. She runs a really successful international business. Her revenue is good. She has a small team and every single member loves her, respects her. But what they don't know is that Alex used to wake up every single morning with a low-grade headache, just kind of the back of her head. She could put her hand on where it was. And she would have aches in her shoulders, particularly between the shoulder blades and often her lower back. She would open wine most nights when she got in. That she was definitely high functioning. But what was it a symptom of? What is high functioning a symptom of? Now, I'm going to keep on asking that question because we behave the way that we do because there's a payoff. There's an outcome. There's something that we get from it. And it's not necessarily what we think. And that is when it can turn into being a bit of a problem. So here's what I want us to recognize. The body is an incredible adaptation machine. It is designed to repeat behaviors over and over again, and it then automates those behaviors so you don't have to keep remembering every single day to do them. And it remembers behaviors that help to regulate your nervous system, which means that turning to things like alcohol or food, particularly high fat, high sugar, high salty foods, high carby foods that allow you to feel a sense of calm or a sense of soothing, right, are not necessarily bad. And coping isn't a weakness. It's actually a strategy. It's a strategy that your body remembers and says to your brain, hey, she's feeling activated. There is a lot going on. Her nervous system is running right into that red. If you think of your nervous system a little bit like a petrol gauge, right down here on empty, and it's as it goes up. Yeah, we're going into that kind of, no, that's the wrong way around for a petrol gauge, isn't it? You know what I'm saying? It goes into high when it's red. Red equals danger. And so your brain goes, hey, do that thing. Do that thing that is going to help you to calm down, to relax. And what we tend to do is we mask that strain. So we perform at an energy level, at an output level that allows us to maintain this kind of persona that we've created, a way of being that actually does allow us to feel to some degree in control because it's familiar and it's known. And we've been running here for a very, very long time. And what does that look like in real terms? Well, it means that we overwork. We tend to be the first one there and potentially the last one to leave. We absolutely focus on the minute details because we're looking for things to be perfect, because we're frightened of dropping the ball, of losing our tiny little edge over maybe our competitor, or dropping down in the hierarchy of people who somebody, a client, potential client, will look for. And all of this stuff means that we tend to turn to things like being busy to avoid what we really feel and what we really think. We turn to alcohol for sure, like Alex did, to literally downregulate, to relax at the end of the day, not realizing that alcohol every night was a big part of the reason why she was waking up with that low-grade headache, because her brain and her body were not actually doing what they should have been doing while she was sleeping, because they were liver function was on overdrive trying to get rid of the alcohol in her system, which meant that her brain wasn't able to have that whole cleaning process that your brain goes through, which I've talked about before. We've got a glymphatic system in the brain, like the lymphatic system in the body, to clear out all of the crap from the day when you're sleeping. The glymphatic system is supposed to do the same for the brain. But if you are running on high adrenaline, high cortisol, there comes a point where those levels will actually not be able to sustain and maintain, and they can dip significantly, and then find it really difficult to work with your circadian rhythm. So to put it in context, we get energy from the sugar, we get energy from the alcohol, and that can help us get a false sense of a boost in adrenaline and a boost of energy. But actually, if our system has decided to go into protection mode and our cortisol is not responding in the way that it should, it means that we can be high functioning, but we can also feel flat. And so many people come to me when they're at that point. It's not burnout. They're not feeling burnt out. They still enjoy to some degree what they're doing. But there's this sensation of, I spoke earlier about being fulfilled. It's just not happening. They're not able to enjoy the stuff that they used to enjoy to the degree that they could before. And then it becomes, what's wrong with me? And this is where they then start to do what so many people do and look at their health, which is a sensible way to go, and look at their patterns, their habits around food and around sleep. And maybe they turn to a personal trainer, and perhaps they stop the drinking, which means that they reduce the sugar intake and they help themselves to start to eat better. But if they are still thinking the thoughts and needing to be a perfectionist and still believing that they have to maintain staying at the top of their game all of the time because there is a fear of what may happen if they don't, then the same levels of cortisol and adrenaline are going to keep on trying to flood in, and you will then start fighting with yourself. And so you may be working with a personal trainer, but you're just not doing the stuff that they've said you need to do. And then guess what? You start missing sessions because you don't want to hear the same things. Well, you just need to implement it. Why are you not doing it? And when you start going down the road of analysis paralysis, that can actually lead to us turning to those behavior patterns for even more soothing and more regulation. In other words, we find that we're turning to food even more instead of less. We're turning to alcohol even more instead of less. And then what do we create? This crazy cycle where we're now not only feeling flat, unmotivated, but we're noticing that actually our body shape isn't changing in the way that we want it to do. It's potentially going the other way. And then that creates a sense of guilt, a sense of I'm wasting money and the trainer's time. And this is where we've got to get honest with ourselves, because when you change or start to take action on changing the wrong things at the wrong time for you, actually going to make things harder. And that makes it even more difficult for us to feel that we are anything like the true version of ourselves that we want to be. Now, I want you to know this. Coping is not a weakness. It is a strategy. And high performance can just mask the strain. And this is real. When we're overworking, we're actually looking for control. When we're turning to alcohol, we are trying desperately to feel a sense of calm and relaxation and, honestly, relief. When we're looking to be perfect and we want everything and everybody around us to be perfect, you know what we're really looking for? It's safety. And when we fill our diary with stuff, with meetings, with running around from here, there and everywhere, convincing ourselves it's a sign of how high performing and how effective we are, actually busyness is avoidance. Now, how do I know this? Well, I've been there. I've done all of these things. And that was my story for a very, very long time. And it was a massive contributory factor to me struggling for way longer with my alcohol issues and my food and body image issues than I actually needed to do. But I just didn't know it, because we can't know what we don't know. And there weren't coaches like me around then to go to and get help to sort this stuff out. Yes, I could have gone to a therapist, and I did. But finding the right therapist who actually is able to understand all of that stuff. And don't forget, therapists are not trained in the gut-brain connection. Now, that's supposed to have changed in 2013. Whether it actually has, I don't know. I still hear people who go to therapists and they're not talking about hormones and neurotransmitters and how the body and brain actually function together, and past traumas and belief systems and values. And without understanding all of that stuff, that is the stuff that affects how we think, how we feel, and how we function, then therapy can help, but only to a certain degree. And I am not against therapy. I think it's fantastic. I think if you can go to somebody and you can open up and you can feel able to talk about the stuff that you don't feel able to talk about with anybody else, it's huge and it's vitally important. So I'm not knocking it, but it's not going to do what, for example, coaching at the level that I do it, that looks at you as a whole human and all of your systems and all of your thought processes and the whole of your history, including what your mum was like and how her health was and what was going on in her world while you were a baby, and your mum's mum, because all of that stuff affects you and who you are and your values and your belief systems and any traumas that may have been passed down on a cellular level, because they absolutely are. Not woo-woo, not science. I don't do woo-woo. I absolutely do woo in terms of woohoo. And I do it in terms of this is what we know. And by the way, none of this stuff is new. You only have to look way back 2,000 plus years ago, where a lot of the Stoics and a lot of the philosophers and a lot of people were talking about stuff back then. Yes, they didn't have the science backing, and yes, they were thought of as being weird. And you all know, I think, hopefully most people know and understand that back in the days where people were getting or dying from going into hospital, and so many women died in childbirth, it was one person who basically said, well, it's because the doctors aren't washing their hands. And that person ended up being imprisoned, and forgotten about me until now, when people will look back and they go, oh my goodness. It takes one person to speak out. It takes one person to say, hey, the obvious, wash your hands. Women are dying in childbirth because bacteria. And it was the simplest thing of washing their hands with soap, and suddenly, guess what? They started to do it. But originally, when it was first mentioned, the person who mentioned it was seen as a charlatan, a heretic, the worst of the worst, and thrown in prison. And this is where we've got to recognize we are now where we are with the stuff that we know, but there's so much stuff we still don't know. And yet so many myths are around. And one of those myths that still, and the schooling system still plays a big part in keeping this myth alive, is to equate achievement and academic achievement, particularly, with intelligence and with success and with being a high performer or a high achiever. And when people come to me, by the time they come to me, they recognize that actually that belief is something that is causing them often illness, or at least physical pain or distress. And what do? We kind of go into compensation. We kind of go, oh my goodness, I need to work harder then, because I'm still not getting the results that I want. I'm still not feeling how I wanted to feel about myself. It must be my fault. I'm not trying hard enough. And so we push and we push through. But all that means is that we turn to the things that are helping us to continue to push through even more. So we drink a little bit more, we start eating more, we start getting more and more hard on ourselves in terms of wanting things to be perfect. And this is where we can almost turn into a situation where the very business that we loved, we start hating because it's not doing what we wanted. The partner that we're with, maybe we start blaming them. Maybe we start being more unkind or less compassionate, should I say, with our kids. Maybe we start telling them what to do and wanting them to be perfect, and lose sight of the fact that a parent's role isn't to make their kids happy or to make them perfect. A parent's role is purely and simply to help the child feel heard, to feel safe, to feel understood. But we lose all of that when we get ourselves into a state of needing and obsessing over being high functioning. And then gets amplified when you get to midlife, because we then have the massive hormone shifts. And this is not just women. This is men and women. Testosterone can take a nosedive massively if you are under pressure and you are being hard on yourself in terms of what you think you should, must, ought to be doing by this point in your life. If you've then got financial stress, if you've then got parents who are ill, and maybe children who are struggling perhaps with university or after, and they're not able to get a job, suddenly now you haven't got your stuff to think about. But you've got all of these other people relying on you. And as a guy, if you're turning to food, then that beer belly, which is not a beer belly, that is a stress belly, will start to appear and grow seemingly overnight. You will start to lose that motivation and that pressure to keep on performing just gets harder and harder. And what we don't want to be doing is putting more pressure on ourselves, because we can't hate ourselves, improve ourselves through hating, through harming, by telling ourselves how rubbish we are, by feeling guilty, by feeling ashamed of what we're not doing. We need to flip that on its head. We need to increase our capacity for compassion for ourselves. We need to increase our resilience in terms of saying no and boundaries, because ultimately that is not going to change. We are going to get older. Now we have a choice as to what getting older looks like. We can have an accumulated stress load. We can have reduced recovery capacity, right? We can change that. We can increase our recovery capacity. We can ensure that we maintain muscle mass and that we focus on great posture and strength. We can help ourselves to do less in terms of the pressure that we put on ourselves by delegating more to others who are better at doing this stuff than we are. And we can decide that actually, if we want to be high functioning in a healthy way, then how we take care of ourselves from a day-to-day basis is the key. We need to think about letting go of the pressure by looking at what actually is in our control. What actually do we need to do to help ourselves not want to keep on turning to food or to alcohol or to scrolling or to overworking? Because if we don't address it, it is only going to get harder. It's not going to get easier. Managing stress, practicing breath work, going for walks, all of these things are helpful strategies to include absolutely as part of what you do during the day. But also, we want to have a look at allowing ourselves to feel our feelings, because feelings are just signals. Feelings are not to be feared. And I'm sharing about fear very soon and how I reframe fear. But feelings are not good or bad. They are just energy in motion, and energy and feelings are information. They are signals, and they help us to know what it is that we need to do. And what the majority of high functioning people need to do is allow themselves to stop and pause and actually review, who am I being and what am I doing? And that is where I start with anybody who works with me. Who are you being right now? I ask a set of questions that allow you to really understand who you are actually being and who you are showing up as. Not who you think you are, but actually who you really are showing up as. It brings in, without you having to sit and do, what are your values, what are your beliefs? It brings in what your values and beliefs are in a simple, organic way, so that you can clearly see what are the things that are driving you into behaviors that actually are coping strategies and compensatory, as opposed to resilience building and helping you to increase your capacity for holding more stuff. Because there's no reason why we can't be a high achiever. But you need to know how to master that, because it is a skill. And it's a skill that you can learn. But you need to learn from somebody who knows what the pitfalls are, who knows what the obstacles are, because they are not obvious. It's the hidden stuff. It's the stuff hiding secretly, quietly in the background. This is the stuff that actually sabotages you to some degree, that stops you from being who you want to be, from feeling the way you want to feel, and from functioning in a way that you know you can, but you just can't seem to be able to get there. And I'm going to tell you, you can get there, but you have to go about it in a strategic way, taking the right steps in the right order for you, for your business, for your family, home life, for the pressures and the absolutes that are on you that you're not going to take off, for the things that you are always going to be responsible for. We have to own those and not dismiss them. We can't pretend that life isn't going to life, but there is a way of doing it. And there are certain things and skills that the majority of people just do not know. And there's nothing wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're stupid or flawed. You can't know everything. None of us do. But when it comes to health and how your brain and your body function, most people are working against it instead of with it. They just don't know in what ways. And that is what I can help you with. So if this does resonate with you, you can choose to keep on being a high functioning, high achieving professional, but you can do it in a way that is not going to lead to an early grave and family members wishing you were still around. You have that choice. I'd love you to reach out to me. You can either leave a comment here and I will get back to you, or you can get in touch with me via LinkedIn, or you can just go directly to book a call with me via my website. And I do suggest that if you don't know much about me and how I work and what I do, then please do spend a few moments checking me out on Google. Go and have a look at my website. Do some due diligence. Have a look at the talks that I've done for various international organizations. Have a look at the articles that I have written and hear me speaking on other podcast episodes, because this isn't just fluff and just something that I do for fun. I'm passionate about helping you not make the mistakes that I watched my members of my family make, that I've seen other people make who I've loved and cared about deeply, because they didn't know any different. They didn't know that there was an alternative. And by the time that they did, it was already, unfortunately, too late for most of them. Not because they weren't capable, not because they weren't intelligent, but because unfortunately they had succumbed to medication and a way of living and being that, to be able to turn around by that stage, was particularly challenging. Don't get to that point, because not only are you robbing yourself from enjoying a life that is just waiting for you, but it's also stopping your family and your friends from being able to enjoy the very, very, very best version of you. And it's not as hard as you may think. So if you have any questions at all, please do ask them. Because if you don't ask, I can't answer. And on that note, I'm going to leave you with this. We only have one life even. We only have one life as far as we know, and one body. So please look after it, because it is looking after you. I would love for you to subscribe, folks. I would love for you to follow me if you are listening to this on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a moment, do please just scroll down through the show notes or through the description and just check out some of those links for some stuff that you may find helpful and interesting. And I wish you a very, very good day. Thank you.